Welcome, everybody. This is our middle grades collaborative conversation number 3. This is our 6th season doing this, and this season is obviously very unusual because we're all trying to teach through a pandemic. And as you're well aware, that pandemic is currently surging through the country and surging through Vermont. And so our discussion today will maybe take on some renewed importance just because people's dynamic is changing as we speak. What we wanted to talk about today is, as we continue to work and teach through the pandemic, how has our instruction changed or evolved? And I think we have folks who, in all different situations here on the discussion. What issues of equity are we still confronting, and how do we ensure that all students have access to resources, lessons, materials, and food? And finally, how are teachers and students dealing with the grind of the pandemic? Prior to the start of the webinar, we were talking about how this is an endurance sport, and how are folks dealing with that? And what strategies are teachers using for self-care, support, and collegiality? This work is sponsored by the Middle Grades Collaborative. And before we go any further, my name is Don Taylor. I teach humanities to grades 7 and 8 at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier. And I'm also on the Middle Grades Collaborative staff. And I'm joined by 3 very dedicated educators. And if they could introduce themselves, I would appreciate that. We'll go with Meg, Maura, and then Kevin.
Hi there, Meg O'Donnell. I teach humanities to 7th and 8th graders at Shelburne Community School.
Hi, I'm Maura Wheeler. I'm the proficiency-based learning and technology integration coach at Lamoille South.
Hi, I'm Kevin Peely Hunt. I'm a 5'8" generalist on Swift House at Williston Central School.
And again, as I mentioned, this work is supported by the Middle Grades Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. We get together once a month to talk about teaching in the era of Act 77, personalized learning, but also obviously now in the era of COVID-19. So I think Maura is going to lead us off. We'll have a few different sections of the conversation, and let's get to it.
Great. So we're about 2.5 months into the school year and into sort of our transition of continuation of learning from last spring. And maybe before we jump into questions, I'd be interested to hear just sort of what your school format looks like. So what does a week look like? What's sort of the scenario that you're working in, if you're totally in person, hybrid, sort of what that looks like before we jump in. Hi, Lindsay. We just did introductions. If you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Lindsay Hallman, Up for Learning.
And thanks for joining us. And Maura, why don't we just stick with that same kind of rotation? We'll go, I guess I can start, and then we'll go Meg, and then Lindsay, and then Kevin, if that's all right.
Yep.
So I'm just going to write that down. Meg. Okay. So the question on the table is, what's the format? And again, I'm at Main Street Middle School, and our format, we've been in person 5 days a week since the beginning of the school year, about September 8th. And our day, I think it's important also to just think about like the details of the day. So our day, we're in a pod structure, and I'm teaching in a different environment. I'm in a cafeteria, which is a larger area. And I have the kids, basically the first kid comes at 7:45. We have a little bit of a staggered arrival with kids on buses and whatnot. 8:30 is homeroom, and that's about 10 minutes. And then we get right into humanities, which I am responsible for. And that goes for about an hour and 10 minutes. We then have an online specials. So it's an asynchronous specials class. And then I have my second humanities class, which is in a different pod. So I actually travel to a different pod. And then again, a humanities class. Then kids have lunch and recess. And then we have a student support time. And then we have a staggered dismissal. So we have a little bit of an abbreviated day, but I'm with kids for the majority of the day. And that's sort of our schedule. And that's where we've been sort of uninterrupted since the beginning of the school year. Meg?
Yeah. So Shelburne is a pre-K-8 school. And so at the very beginning, we were all in A-B pods. So kids are in Monday, Tuesday, B kids are in Thursday, Friday. and the teachers are in 2 days a week, and then everyone's remote on Wednesday, and then teachers are either remote or in person the other 2 days of the week. And so the way we've done it at the 7-8 team is we have done, we shrunk the field. That was sort of feedback that we got from kids last year, that instead of trying to manage 4 content areas, they're managing 2. So we are in a 3-week rotation for that. So we have, so I'm at the end of my 3rd 3-week rotation. So I have been in on Monday, Tuesday, and now I'm home Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with the A kids. Next week, I switch over to the B kids. So they get a humanities and a math, and then a humanities and a science rotation. And our classes are about 80 minutes long, both in person and in remote. And so essentially our day is more like a homeroom. And then when I'm in person at school, we have sort of an L-shaped structure on our team, with our classes having adjoining doors. So I essentially teach from an adjoining door, and I'm teaching to 2 different rooms. So I have a pod, the pod stays, and they're anywhere from 8 to 12 kids in each pod. And I'm either running frantically between those 2 rooms, trying to get the technology up and running, or running a meet and then driving it from my Chromebook, or hopping back and forth between 2 rooms. And then when I'm in remote, I obviously just have the 20 plus kids or whatever on those remote days. Our K4 is in 4 days a week. And December 7th, I think our 5-6 is coming in. And they're still, the jury's still out on if we can manage. I think it's around what you were sort of indicating, Don, like we're with kids pretty much all day. We're with them through lunch. We're with them through snack. They do go off to EAs, but they don't go off to EAs. They were when they could go outside. Now EAs are being delivered through remote access, and they're in our pod. So we don't necessarily have to be there. Paraprofessionals are helping, but I'm not sure how long that will last. So that's their structure.
Lindsay, I'm wondering from you and your work supporting youth adult partnerships and teachers, sort of what does it look like in your world right now, 2.5 months into the school year?
Yeah, well, it looks like so many different things. We're working with some schools in person, some schools in a hybrid way, and some schools fully virtually. And so, like for instance, yesterday, we were in Winooski at their community center. There were some folks that were on a Zoom from the youth adult team, some folks that were in person. Most of our work sometimes looks like us being remote and the team being in person, because we can't get in, it's not, the protocols are such that it really doesn't make, it's not safe for us to be going into schools. We're not part of those pods. And then there's some teams that are just fully, like our Cultivating Pathways has been fully remote, because we have teams from not just in Vermont, but across the world and in Mississippi. And so that's, so it looks like a variety of things. And it's, I'm just glad that it's just nice to be able to see faces. It is quite nice to be in person, but I also, there's a lot of risk involved. So we've been trying, when we can be in person in the beginning of the year outside with groups, we did that. And as it's getting colder and the numbers are going up, just thinking most of our work will look like this.
And Kevin, what does it look like right now for you and your team?
Yeah, so I can definitely speak for Swift House. Again, I'm at Wilson Central, and I give our admin a lot of credit. Every team I feel like has a different structure, and they kind of let us roll with what works for our system and for our teachers and kids. So for Swift House, we're doing a hybrid model. So we're 2 in-person days and 2 remote days. So my group of kids I have on our group 1 day would be Monday, Tuesday, and then I follow those kids on Thursday, Friday remote. So I'm in the building Monday, Tuesday, and then I have that same group of kids Thursday, Friday remotely. And then we're all off Wednesday. We're all remote Wednesday, and that's where we decided as a team to focus in on our PLP work. Our mentors and mentees will meet up on Wednesdays, and we have our lit groups, which happen once a week remotely then as well. Similar to what Meg was saying, we got a lot of feedback from kids, and just talking as the teachers too about the shrinking the field piece. Felt like it was a lot last year when we went remote to try to have so many classes going on. So again, we really trying to zone in on, all right, we're doing humanities, math, and science. So like those are their 3 core classes. And then the balance has been fine. We're a pretty tight team, which is great in terms of collaborating. So we're all really flexible and willing to work creatively with different things. So we always laugh because it feels like it's been 5 times the amount of planning and prep, which I think everybody feels. And it's, for us being 5'8" generalists, it's, typically I might have a 5th and 6th grade social studies class, but now it's like I'm planning that for myself to teach, for somebody else to teach remotely. And I'm also learning about the 7-8 plans I have to implement in person and remote. So it's, it's just that piece of it makes you feel like a first year teacher again at times. And it's, I have to say though, through this, we're so lucky to have the interventionists that we have in our school, our tier 2 interventionists, because I'm thinking about for us in Swift House, since we are 5'8", during the day, we have a 5th grade math class, a 6th grade math class, 7th grade, 8th grade with 2 teachers in at once. So we worked our schedule out, and our math interventionist in our school has come in, and she's actually doing 6 different levels of math, and she's just a teacher. She's like, yeah, I'll do it. Just give me the lesson plans. I'll go in and act as a teacher and do that for the lesson. And it's, without batting an eye, and she's been absolutely incredible. We're so grateful for her, but at the same time, like, we are putting these people in an awful position to, their role as interventionists, and all of a sudden we're saying, oh, you're a classroom teacher now, which is, dealing with the management things that are still issues, even with 11 kids in the class, and dealing with, knowing all the classroom protocols and XYZ, and just getting to have these relationships with all these, instead of just a handful of kids that you would have been working with, now, classes full of kids and across classes. So, and then this health side of it, the exposure, that much more exposure to different kids. So again, we're super, super fortunate to have that. But I just want to point that out, that we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the work that we're doing without them. So that's our overall structure, and it echo a lot of what Meg has said. Being in the same district, we had to offer plans for what would it look like for 5-6 to come back 4 days. And again, that's going to be wild for Swift House because we're the only team that has 5-8. So we'd have to figure out what to do with the extra group of 7th and 8th graders. And then we also had to bring up plans for what it's going to look like to go fully remote. So those were 2 really fun conversations to have 20 minutes from each other of, all right, you're all back in school 4 days. What's that going to look like? Or we have to go all remote. And I'm glad that we're planning for it. But, it's a lot, we all know it's a lot on teachers to be thinking about.
Thanks so much. It's so interesting to hear all the different ways that people are really working to try and meet student needs within this context of being safe, and then also, taking care of kids, and how do we do that? I am curious sort of how you're thinking about integrating social emotional learning in your spaces, both in person and remote. And then also along those same lines, like, how are folks monitoring the needs of students, both academically and social emotional needs within this sort of configuration that you're in?
I just want to welcome Joe Rivers. Joe, do you want to just give a quick introduction to yourself?
I'm Joe Rivers. I work at Brattleboro Area Middle School.
All right, thank you so much. And I guess the question on the table is just about SEL, social emotional learning. And then the second part of that was about equity. Could you just repeat that second part more real quick?
So the second part was about, we're all in different configurations. And so how are teachers monitoring the needs of students, both the academic needs, but also social emotional needs, and their basic needs as well?
Right.
And what does that look like for you in your schools?
So I think the that's a huge benefit of being face to face with kids, right? I mean, you can see when a kid's having a bad day. It's not that they haven't showed up at the remote learning. It's not that they're, you can just see it. You can talk to them about it. Today I was having a conversation with a kid, just that little 2 minute, just kind of kneeling down, for less than 15 minutes, 3 feet away, but just having those conversations and kind of just tuning kids up and talking them up and coaching them on what's happening. And, I think the social emotional piece, unfortunately, I think that's been, at least in the face-to-face part, I think that's been, we're aware of it and we have people who are working really hard to integrate that. But when you have so little time at the beginning, you have so little time, right? And I feel like that I'm being pressed. I feel like that right now, I want my kids to be able to go home and say, you know what, I'm getting an education, right? And it's in a different way and it looks different, but like we're learning about the Constitution, you know what I mean? Like we're learning about what's relevant and voting, and we had the election. And I kind of want families and kids to feel like this year has purpose and it's moving them forward. And I also am, and then so there's that pressure on you, but then there's also this pressure to, kids are dealing with a lot, right? And as I talked about in the intro, it's not getting better. And so that becomes a tension as well. And yesterday, kids were off the charts. And I was like, it was picture day was one thing. And then I'm like, come on, it can't just be pictures, right? But then I started thinking about, well, we're also going into Thanksgiving and we're going into all these holidays where kids might have these traditions where their family comes up or they go somewhere, and that's not going to be happening. That you double down on that with the next holiday after that, right? And then all of a sudden you have the prospect of kids facing sort of a bleak winter. And if sports gets canceled, so then those are the social emotional issues we're talking about, right? And we're like, we don't have the opportunity to, like, we can get in circles and have that kind of conversation, but you can't get in those small groups. You can't have these, it feels like we're, everybody has to be spaced out. Everybody's got a mask on. And it's just kind of difficult to have those same practices that you had before. And so I like in the last week or two, I've been really concerned about the fact that I'm standing a lot of times or directing instruction. Kids are spaced out in rows. Kids get escorted to the bathrooms by an adult, so there's a lot of structures in place. And the whole idea is that we're trying to keep kids safe and we're trying to keep kids separated, because if they have the contact tracing or anything like that, they need to know exactly where the kids are in the school. And then also we're trying to contain that in our pods, right? And so the social emotional piece is there, like it's so there, it's like right under the surface, but I'm finding it a challenge to talk about that or to name the issues and have meaningful conversations about it and lessons about it just kind of in the environment. And so right now that's something that is kind of difficult. And I also think that, these are middle school kids who have all sorts of issues in general. And like, are they getting to meet with the counselors when they need to? Are they getting the support services that they need? Are they, we have this thing now, it's called an interpod postal, where we're sending postcards between the pods, because some of these kids don't get to see their friends who are in another pod. And I think they're feeling that. And so I think there's a lot of challenges out there for sure.
So when I think about these two ideas, right, meeting their needs, their social emotional and their academic or other just basic needs. So we're in the middle of doing our conferences right now. And so students have put together a couple of slides to share with their families. We gave them a structure and then they could embellish. And that has been the most like uplifting and like affirming, like, okay, we're going to be all right. Like, and then sort of simultaneously heartbreaking, right? Like, so because of our 3-week rotation, I still have my prime group And what I'm seeing is that for some of my my seventh graders, I've seen them for 1 3-week pod. Like I've seen them for one session. So that broke my heart a little bit, because I was like, here I am chatting with these kids, and I really only have this small window of experience. And what was affirming was, it's not about what I have to say about the kids. It's really what they have to say, right? And just what I'm gleaning from that is, I can see the support that's happening, because the parents are right there for some of these kids. I still have some outstanding kids that haven't signed up yet, and so that's a little worrisome, a little wonder. I'm just curious where so there's that equity piece that's coming into play. How can I make sure that those kids have a chance to be celebrated, to be supported, if it's not working for their family, given the time, given whatever the circumstances that's gotten in the way. So I'm curious about that. I got to figure that out. But when we're talking about it's just this opportunity to just blast them with like love and support. Like, go, you look what you're doing. You are like juggling these two worlds. And I'm hearing from the parents, like, we aren't involved. We are busy with our jobs. We are out at our workplace. And so that just gives me another window to like, wow, you are really on your own in this dynamic. So like anytime, it's like, it gives you the boost to keep going, to just say, okay, like we're on a roll, we've got some things going. And then, there's this other really real dynamic. I have one particular pod, I'm going to be starting with them next week, that had an incident that happened in a remote setting in my class. And there's some fracture there. And so I've got my circle forward book, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I repair this really, and now we're seeing this damage, this like fracture, not only in remote settings, but in person as well. It's really hard. There's a lot of power dynamic, and there's some social clout going on. And so that's like, while I'm feeling really bolstered, and so I know it's not about my SEL, but I'm feeling really bolstered, and I think the kids are feeling the celebration of those conferences. There's this other undercurrent that that's weighing on me a little bit.
Lindsay, I'm wondering, from your work with some of your partner schools, if you have examples or thoughts about, how do we meet these needs of young adolescents that we know in a regular setting is so vital, and it's the ultimate piece of middle school, and then now we're in these new settings. So sort of, what are your thoughts on how to help meet those needs?
Well, first, I just wanted to, I think Meg, the experience that you provided for your learners this week was like mind blowing. And it just shows that I don't think you're welcome. I don't think you would have had quite a panel like that if it wasn't virtual, and so I would love for you to be able to explain what you did. And I mean, to me, that was like, I wrote down as like my best thing that happened for me on Monday was the Active Citizens panel. And I have the quote that I forget who shared it, but if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, Madeline Coonan. And I feel like I like met I was like inspired. So I hope, do you want to share what you did? And then I can go back to the question.
Yes, very, very quickly. So we're similar to Don, where, we were studying the election and what does it mean to be an active citizen, with a whole host of other tasks that were in there. And then we're looking to kids to think about what they want to advocate for, either through by reaching out to newly elected officials. What do you want to see? What's the impact? We keep thinking about impact. So how can I make an impact as a student, as a citizen? And so we asked a series of, a couple of parents and other folks that we could include. So it was Lindsay for Upper Learning. It was Joan Lennis, who's a former legislator. It was a parent who's a trustee at the library. It was Outright Vermont. It was Lauren Traster from 4-H. It was Eris Garcia from Peace and Justice Center. And so they each just sort of shared their life experience, their story, and how their life passions or life experience led to passions. Passion leads to action, or interest, and then action, and action leads to impact. So that's sort of the thread that we're kind of following. And Lindsay came with Mira and talked, and it was again, really just inspiring, and to see the threads that were the same throughout the panels. And I don't think we would have been able to host that. And it was an opportunity to get the in-person kids and the remote kids together, even for an hour. But it was an opportunity for them to have a common experience.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly powerful, Meg, having just witnessed it, and the fact that I'm sure it required a lot of coordination to have both the in-person and the remote learners take part. But what an opportunity for folks to hear from. I was so inspired by the stories that I heard, and so I was thinking, well, that's the learning. I mean, like, those are the things those are the opportunities, and so what am I seeing? What I'm seeing is probably very different than someone that's a practitioner in the classroom right now, because when I'm working with youth, we're co-designing and planning facilitation to work with youth adult teams. And so there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of willingness to probably do more than when we were in school full time for my middle and high school facilitators, because I think they have more flexibility, perhaps, or B, this is perhaps providing them a space to feel really active, empowered, engaged, because so I am finding that Wednesdays are like my day where I'm like fully, like, that is like the money day for everyone. It's like we have to do everything on Wednesday because there's the most flexibility. So so we're trying to work around that to figure out, well, okay, if Wednesday's flexible and there's no flexibility on the other days, it feels like, and so that's not what we want to see. But I also get it, because it's like the pods and the whatnot, all the things. And so, yeah, I mean, I see youth that are really showing up in different ways. I was just on a call the other day, yesterday, with a number of youth who I don't think this would have happened either. Like this connection of all these different youth activists who are in towns throughout Vermont doing racist mascot work or anti-racist work, and they're connecting together and they're talking and they're establishing a network and they're organizing. And I think before we were like kind of in our own little communities, and like this is, again, so from my perspective, it's obviously such a different perspective, but I'm just seeing these the door opening, and then being able to see that, being able to be part of the experience, Meg, on Monday showed me like these things are still possible, like, and they're really powerful. And so that's where I'm at.
Kevin, can you share what it looks like on your team?
Yeah, so again, I can echo some of the things that Meg was saying. We started up our PLP conferences, and I'm just like, holy moly, this has been amazing. And I wish we could do so many of them all the time, because you just get that one-on-one time with the kid and their guardians, and you just get to celebrate the awesome work that they're doing. Some of them are just really love talking about their PLP goals, and then we get into just like how are things in general, and just having that conversation, that check-in is so valuable. It's like we usually block off 30 to 45 minutes for them, and I feel like it flies, right? It's just like I almost want to stay on longer, just because you finally get to just have that uninterrupted time of just getting in touch with this kid. And it's just so valuable, and it's been a big celebration. Makes me sad that we only do one a trimester, but obviously I get that. And then the other thing, that I was thinking as we were talking about this, especially with the prompt, like how are we, monitoring needs and checking in. We have Kid Talk, or what we call Kid Talk, every Wednesday, which is our administrators are on, counselors on, it's our whole team. And the whole purpose of it is just to bring kids to the table that, might have some red flags coming up, or kids that we just want to like circle around as a team to figure out what we can do to best help them. And especially now it's a challenge because like somebody that might be my original core student is in the group that I'm not in person. So like I have a relationship with them, the family, but I'm not with them in person. So like that's been a challenge, but just that time once a week has been so valuable of us, like really just being able to peel it back and say, are we addressing these kids' needs? If not, what do we need to do? And having the admin at the table too, so we can, have the immediate sounding board of this is what we need. Like not, it's an email after we had this conversation. It's like they're there, they're listening to us. We're able to say like, red light, green light, can we go do this? And they typically let us, because we had one, just whether our schedule works out, the student, wasn't in school on a Tuesday, which, some kids miss. And then that means that she would have been remote Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. She missed those. And then you had Saturday, Sunday, wasn't in school again Monday. So it's like all of a sudden you go like 7 to 8 days without contact with this student. And, we're spinning our wheels. We're contacting admin. They're following protocol. But it's like, that's where I get nervous about our model of how it is right now, is how quickly those kids can fall through the cracks without a check-in, just because like all of a sudden, when we only have 2 in-person days, miss one, it's not glaring, but then it's like you just don't see them again, and it's really scary. So we've had to come up with some different protocol around just home checks and making sure that we're able to get boots on the ground in the community and just checking in our kids who they're not responding in anything we're doing, and if we don't have them in the building and we're not getting them remotely, like, we have to make sure they're okay. So those are some serious conversations that we've had to have. So again, I'm just glad that we have the opportunity for it, but I wish that it was a little tighter of a protocol there. And then, other things going well, SEL wise, we really value our advisory time, both remote and in person. I think that's a great time for us to just be together as a community and check in, and just even doing a quick greeting of, Rosebud, Thorn Gardner, or who's somebody that's been really helping you this week. Just hearing out for a quick share out that is low stakes for kids is great for those check-ins. And one thing we're grappling with as a team, we try to do core journals or these more SEL prompts, but then the feedback we're getting from kids is, are you giving us more work to do? And it's like, but it's important work and we want to hear from you and hear what you're doing. So it's that balance. And then like, how are we getting the feedback back to them? And it's all, I think you all understand where I'm coming from with that one. So it's trying to grapple with all those pieces.
Thanks. And Joe, you're in a slightly even different scenario than other folks are. Could you talk a little bit about what that looks like for you and how you're teaching this year?
We're using transferable skills as the things that we're focusing on. And so we're trying to normalize this craziness by using as content the material that's around us. So Vermont Digger articles about the COVID-19 situation now, those are our reading materials, and those are the things that create the prompts for us. The Electoral College has been the topic for us for a few weeks, writing opinion papers and things like that. Because in the remote setting, there's a lot of isolation. We're trying to have the conversation that's permeating society be the conversation that's within our Zooms with our students. And so that's our content. So that's one way to try to deal with the stresses that the kids are facing, trying to normalize them so that they don't feel like they're in it by themselves. And that's been somewhat helpful, I think, for many of them. We have just gone through our student-led conferences as well, you know, through the Zoom world, and that was a lot of fun. It was a way to see the students in a different setting with their adults, and it breaks down some of the walls that operate in this Zoom environment. I guess those are the big things that we're trying to do. It's stressful for the students. We've been sort of putting together our team on the fly, and we have been able to advocate to add components so that things like what Kevin was talking about, where people are missing for periods of time. We have folks who are designated now to address all those things. So we're having contact daily with everybody that we're responsible for. And that contact might not be directly with one of us as the teachers, but we have other people who are making sure that everything's cool still in a time when it's not cool. Hi, Monica.
Hi, Monica.
Hi, so sorry to jump in so late. I just got off a department meeting and I was like, I really wanted to see what y'all are up to. So I'm just here to listen. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to see you. I'm so, reminded as I was listening to you all, I wrote down routines and rituals. And when I hear what you're saying, there's sort of two pieces to that. One, as Don was saying, a lot of routines and rituals that students look forward to that are coming up this time of year are being interrupted for them. And then at the same time, routines and rituals like the advisory or the daily check-in or different structures that we have and how effective those are at trying to meet some of those needs and keep kids connected. And so that's just something that sort of was going through my mind as I was hearing you all talk. But what's so evident is the amount of work and the thoughtfulness that's going into really trying to meet the needs of young adolescents through this pandemic. So Don, I'm thinking we should probably jump to the next section.
Yeah. And I think I just want to reiterate what Maura just said. I think there's so much still to talk about. And I just, again, always appreciate people's, their perspective and what's going on and hearing from other people and their practices. I think that maybe if we go to equity in the curriculum, Maura, is that where you wanted to go? And maybe Kevin, you can kind of take the reins there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, next thing we want to really just focus in on and have a conversation about is this equity in the curriculum piece, and how we're addressing these equity issues that come up during the pandemic. We have a few prompts here, and one that came up and that I'm interested in hearing from others about too is what are we doing with the students, or what are we doing like structurally or systematically with the students who are expected to receive specific services during this time. I think that's a big thing that's come up, and honestly, I think for a classroom teacher, it's been magnified a little bit more since we've gotten into our conferences, because we're starting to schedule those some IEP meetings as well, and it's really like, all right, now we have the magnifying glass up to how have we done pretty much by the law in terms of providing services, and how are we making sure that we're still creating equitable access for all of our students. So I would love to start there and see how everybody's doing with that, or what you've seen as obstacles or successes with that. Don, you want to start us off?
Yeah. I think that one of the things I think Joe just mentioned, like normalizing things, like making things seem normal. And again, because I'm with the kids all the time, every day, I think I've just tried to create a pattern and some routines. And one of the things I've been looking at it as an expedition, and I've been looking at expeditionary behavior. I might have said this before, but I said we're starting in September and we're going to try and get to June. And that's our expedition. And we're in this together. And what are we going to do to make it, right? And so there's some expeditionary behavior strategies that like, how are we going to resolve conflict? How are we going to work together? How are we going to face unexpected challenges? And so we're talking to kids about that. At the same time, I'm trying to normalize things and instruction, so that when a kid does come into school, there's like the routines. This is what we're doing today. And kids have opportunities to reflect a lot. We're doing a lot of reflective writing this year. And also that kids have the opportunity to think about, as Joe mentioned, some of the relevant topics. But one of the things that I'm really trying to work on is creating support structures for all kids. So, simple things like making sure that everybody has a graphic organizer. We're actually reading right now a book called Fever 1793, which is about a yellow fever pandemic. And we're making the connections between what happened then and what's happening now. And our key question is, what is the role of government? And what did the government do then, and what is the government doing now? And so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm reading the book aloud, right, so that all kids can hear it. And at the same time, I'm recording it, and I'm recording my reading, and I'm putting that up on the website, just so that kids, if we do go remote, kids will know where to go and what to do. And I practice with them a lot, like, hey, kids, remember that if we go remote tomorrow, the first thing you're going to do is go onto YouTube for a live session. And we've practiced that, and we're making those routines so that all kids are aware of that. And then in terms of the support services, I work pretty closely with the special educators. They're not actually, they can come into our pod, but it's very, they're not right there. So we don't actually have, sometimes last year we would have a special educator right in the classroom, and we don't have that anymore. So you really have to be cognizant about that, and about supporting those kids, and about modifying assignments if necessary. And I think what's also happening is that kids who tend to get stressed out about school are maybe getting more stressed out this year. If they miss a day, or if they miss more than one day, or if they don't understand something. And again, that's where I think the face-to-face is so great, because a kid can tell you in their feedback, I didn't understand this. Can you go over it? Okay, I can do that the next day, instead of having to wait, 3 or 4 days to see them in person again. But just being super cognizant about where kids are. We've done some baseline reading assessments, so that you kind of know, okay, this is where kids are, and this is what this is what kids can read independently, and this is what kids need support with. And I don't know, just kind of going back to basics in a way. The flip side of that is going back to basics. I feel that a lot of time I'm falling behind, hearing what people are doing online and with the technology and, the innovation. I feel like I might actually be going the other way and going backwards a little bit. And I'll just add one thing. At some point, the world and teachers need to have a collective feedback session, where we can all just sit down and say, what the heck worked, and what the heck can we get rid of, and forevermore. And I'd love to be part of that conversation.
Thanks, Don. Meg?
Yeah. So it's occurred to me, we're in getting ready for conferences. We're also looking at getting ready for assessments and jump rope, and I haven't even set up my glasses yet. And anytime I'm giving students feedback with the scale up at the top and where they landed on the scale, I'm like kicking myself, because I feel like this is, it all depends on how it lands on the student, right? And how they see that feedback as either like informative, like it's moving me along, or as it's like a judgment stopgap. And I feel like despite lots of efforts to reframe what it means when you get this kind of feedback, it's just a real constant need to remind them that this is about the journey and not, where they are. And similar to what Don was saying, we've done some preliminary assessments to sort of see where the trends are for kids, like how did we exit from last year into if their last assessment was last March and now they're getting like a star 360 or whatever the assessment is. It's giving us a little window and we're seeing some patterns, right? So something that something I'm trying to be really cognizant of and be intentional about is how, what are the accommodations that I can put in place for all kids so that it's universal. And even with that, I know that I'm still not meeting kids' needs. And I need to just give a huge shout out to our special educators. They are dipping into, hopping between teams and grade levels to try to meet the needs of the variety of students that are in our buildings, and they are out straight. And what are some universal accommodations that I can put in place? I'm trying to be super conscious of that, and it's a work in progress. It's just a constant reminder. But again, like every time I listen to you guys share some ideas, I'm reminded like, oh yeah, this is something that I'm doing that's okay. And here's something that I can try moving forward. And I think for the most part, bolstering kids first so that they can feel efficacious, they can feel like they're in charge, setting really small, acknowledging small accomplishments for them goes a long way to help them feel like, okay, I can tackle this next challenge because there's going to be the next challenge. So what have I already demonstrated? And really trying to point out to them, look at what you've been doing. So you might not see these things as accomplishments, but you have been doing this work, in these circumstances or situations. So you can handle this. Now we can use that efficacy to move forward with the next challenge. So stay tuned. I'm sure that wasn't very helpful, but
it was. Thanks, Meg. And Lindsay, I know this is obviously, it looks very different in terms of thinking about services for kids for you, but I think it would be great to hear, I know you guys are super purposeful about what you do to make sure, your partners have equitable access to, the materials that they're getting from you and whatnot. So whatever you'd like to talk to there would be great.
Yeah, no, thank you for framing it that way. I think, again, so some of the members of our Youth Advisory Council have been really thinking a lot about this concept of radical inclusion and what that might look like. And so we've been beginning to have conversations about that, because inclusion implies that everyone, isn't included, right? Everyone is part of it, but that's not the case. So what would it mean to have radical inclusion? So we've been thinking about that a lot. And then as an organization, we've spent a lot of time. When our organizations first began, we primarily worked with high schools, but over the past couple of years, we are working more and more with middle schools to elementary schools. So we are doing our own work internally with a lot of different questions where we, let's see if I can grab some of the questions right now, but looking at our materials and just asking a lot of really important questions about them to see about who is this accessible to, who is it not accessible to, and how can we make it more accessible. And let me see if I can find, so somebody, here we go. The questions that we've been talking about. So for our materials that we use in facilitating is scaffolding needed to meet different age groups, reading abilities, language, So what would that look like? Is the language accessible for all members of the audience, like the words and phrases and concepts that we use a lot? Is that really accessible? What, if any, words, names, phrases strongly reflect dominant white culture? What cultural or gender values might be inferred from the wording or content of the statement, question, activity? Is this an inclusive value? Who might be excluded from participation because of language, comprehension, sight, hearing, mobility differences? Who will feel invited, welcomed through the representation of shared experiences? And what power dynamics or assumptions about power dynamics are being implied or represented? So we've been really using those questions to critically look at all of our materials that we share with teams and doing a lot of work with those. And then just as an example, I think it was a really powerful learning, unlearning, learning experience for myself and my partners. Yesterday, we had our second retreat in Winooski, and there's a lot of things that we learned in that first retreat that reflected a lot of those questions, but we've been working with those questions for so long. And what we knew was needed for the second retreat was that all the materials needed to be translated into multiple languages, that there was a language spoken by a member of the group that didn't have a written language, so we needed to have a translator, and that we just in general needed to slow down and think about building relationships amongst the team, which is the theme here. And so it was really powerful to have an experience where we were really trying to explore that even on a deeper level when you're in a multilingual community and a multi-generational community. And to have a member of our team be a translator, and standing side by side allowed people to actually take some time to think about it in different ways. And so I know we're not in the classroom and doing, I can't even imagine, but we are, those are the questions that we're really thinking about and our youth partners are thinking about.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Lindsay. And it just made me think why aren't we during our in-service days at the beginning of the school year, really focusing in on have every teacher look at those questions, look at the curriculum you're offering and go through as a checklist. Are we doing these things? Because and thinking back to equity literacy framework, if we can't recognize, can't move forward on the scale there. So I think bringing those questions into play, there's so much time for PD. I'm I wish we had time to spend on those, or we did spend time on those. Yeah, Don.
Yeah, can I just tag on to something, Lindsay? You just said something that really that triggered something for me. Is one of the things that I've been doing this year. I want to teach the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and some of the traditional stuff, especially in light of what's happening today. But the Center for Cartoon Studies has this amazing democracy. And the reason I bring this up is that I'm trying to use visuals and imagery or graphic novels a lot more often this year because it's easier for kids to see and understand. And it's also so much more friendly as opposed to oh, here's a piece of text that you have to understand. But instead, hey, look at how creative this is. And so you were talking about presenting things in different ways and making sure that kids can understand it on many different levels. And when you have visuals, I think kids can understand that on many different levels. And so that's just something that I've been trying to do this year, is to include more comic style integration and to make sure that all kids have access to that material.
Thanks, Don.
I also just wanted to add one more thing because of the online learning. We've been thinking a lot about young people or adults that might have challenges visually or hearing, and are they receiving closed captioning services? Are materials magnified, or those? And so there's to me, those were things that sometimes I thought about when I was in the classroom. And sometimes the things were there to support it, but now I'm seeing there's room for even more, and so I just wanted to mention that too. I think we're all going to have some really impacted eyesight after this.
think we all agree with that one. How about you, Joe? Not about the impacted eyesight, about
I've already got that. Well, I think the whole equity issue in remote, everything's changed when you're in remote because self-direction is a feature of remote learning that we measure students in lots of different ways, but self-direction isn't one that has been emphasized as much, I think, in person and is really necessary in remote. And so we've seen kids rise and fall that have different skill sets, not because of where the typical reasons, because they can't read that well, or they struggle with comprehension in some way or another, but because they're driven or they're not driven, by themselves, internally. And so in this remote world, there are actually some special education students who are flourishing. And then there are some students who in person are the kids who are straight A students who are always looking to please the teacher and move forward that way. And they're struggling because there isn't enough of that contact to get the feedback loop that drives them. And so equity is different in this remote environment. Some of the things that we've struggled with, we have students from 3 different schools that have joined us in this school that we've created. and so the IEPs that come with them, the 504s that come with them, the EST plans that come with them, all had different authors with different structures. And so what we found we needed to do right at the beginning of the school year is we had to advocate really strongly, and we had to call every meeting we could call. And so we were not getting services for the students that we needed to have services. And so the only way we could get them was to call meetings and say, we need a 504 meeting for this person, we need an IEP meeting. So teachers can call meetings, and that's what we had to do in order to be able to pull the services in, drag them in some ways, in order to be able to accommodate the student needs. Because we can do synchronous learning for a set period of time, but students also need supports in smaller group settings. And the only way we could get that was to advocate for an academic support teacher, to advocate for a special educator, to advocate for a paraprofessional whose only job was to be a liaison between the family and the teachers in trying to make sure that things were smoothed out as much as possible, because information sharing, in this environment is just so different. And being able to understand each other when the only way we do it is through email or this. So things are different, and the whole question of equity is different in this world. And it's been a learning curve for all of us.
Thanks, Joe. I know that definitely, I've been thinking with the remote piece, I feel like it's definitely magnified, how are we providing accommodations? Because I feel like when we're in person, we're all so equipped with all these tools and things to use on the fly, even that we just kind of know our kids so well, we can just use them, versus, when we're remote, it takes so much more of that pre-planning and making sure that everything's in line. We've really leaned on Google Classroom and different features that has for being able to tier different lessons. And I know I always go back to Don. I think you made a point, one of our previous webinars, of just asking myself, like, who is this lesson for? Who's this assignment for? Who am I making this material for? And going through it with that lens just changes the way, I assign things. And it's been great that, to be using tools like the whiteboard.fi app that kids can get on and provide visuals for everybody that everybody can access. But it's just a huge challenge. And the thing that keeps coming up with us with our hybrid model, the 2 and 2 is just the access to materials and resources, like those kids who really need like visual hands-on materials, manipulatives to use, and somebody there to help them use them. Like that's so hard to do over a screen. There's only so many different virtual tools you can use that until it's just like you need to be able to manipulate something with your hands. So we're definitely struggling with that a little bit on our end.
I think, Kev, too, sometimes I find that the days where I have kids in remote, I really want to do a hands-on task. And the days when I have like in person, I need to, it lends itself more to remote tasks. And that's been an interesting dance as well.
Well, folks, it's 4:15. I guess I'm just sitting here thinking about how committed you folks are to the profession, and just, I mean, I just listen and I feel like, holy cow, you guys are just so committed and so good at what you do, and I'm just sitting here learning and trying to soak it up because it's unbelievable. And I just want to thank you for your commitment. And I know that one of the things that we talk about is teacher self-care and support. And this is something when I come to these and I just know I'm going to feel good about what's going on. And I know that I kind of gets me recharged. I got some work to do ahead of me after listening to you folks. I just want to end with maybe a final word. And I just want to, if people have just kind of one, maybe a resource. I know that Lindsay has some events coming up and I want to make sure she knows about them. And just kind of like maybe if we could finish with a final word, one thing that you're doing to stay balanced now, and then one thing that you're going to work on moving forward. And I also have two things I want to remind folks out there is that our next webinar is on Thursday, December 10th. And then on January 23rd, I believe, on Saturday, January 23rd is the middle grades conference. That is going to be from 9 o'clock to 4:30 on a Saturday. It's virtual, it's free, and they're having a great speaker, Dr. Dina Simmons from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. She's going to be the keynote speaker. So those are the things that I'm going to promote. And I guess I'll start off with my final word is just, again, the commitment that you folks are showing in the face of such challenges is just really inspiring. And I just want to applaud the work that you're doing. It's awesome. And one of the things that, I'm continue to work on is how can I get student-driven ownership of our course of study in a very structured and regimented environment. So those are my final thoughts. And maybe if we could just go Maura, Lindsay, Joe, Monica, Meg, and Kevin. Does that work? Okay.
So my final thoughts, I am ramping up, going back to work. And so I have a lot that I'm going to be putting on my plate. But, I think hearing from you and what you're experiencing in the classroom and connecting with some of our teachers, there's so much that I have been thinking about. One sort of my last thought though, Cornelius Miner's book, We've Got This, there's a really great template for thinking about students and student needs and sort of breaking your team of students apart and trying to think about how to meet their needs. So I'll send that along so we can put that in the resources because I think it connects to some of the things that folks were talking about today.
Thank you. Lindsay?
I don't really have a word, but I guess I'm just really grateful for all the work that you all are doing every day in the classroom. I mean, I can't even imagine how hard this has got to be and how draining, and just really appreciate it. Appreciate you all. And I just shared in the chat next Wednesday, which tends to be the flexible day, everyone. From 9 to 12 is our Powered Square Summit. There's some really great sharing sessions and open conversations. And our Youth Advisory Council has been really pumped to share this and plan it. And yeah, so if you can hop on at any point, we'd love to have you. You can have a field trip, have your pod join on a field trip, or if they're on an off day or whatever, throw it out there. We really would love folks to be part of it.
Thanks, Lindsay. Joe?
This is hard. It's not going to be forever, but I think it's important that folks figure out how to deal with the changes that are around our commitments. It's important to be able to draw a line somewhere and to take care of ourselves. It's not easy, but to be able to just get outside, read a book for pleasure, watch BritBox, or something. This is going to give you a break, because the lines are blurred around when our job ends now. So we have to figure that out on our own in order to be able to make it long term here, because it looks like it's going to be long term for this year anyway.
All right, thanks, Joe. Monica?
Hi, everybody. Much as like Maura said, she's at the beginning of a new journey. And I also am at the beginning of a new journey with a new 10th grader in my house. And today was his first day of school. And when I say it was his first day of school, it was his first day of school remotely. So tomorrow he'll be going in and then going to school on Fridays and Tuesdays. So for me, again, it's the beginning of a new journey. I am so uplifted by seeing your faces and hearing what you have to say about all the efforts that are being put in on behalf of all the kids. And I think more and more about family, of course, and the support that some students have and some don't. And then I think a lot about social, and what you were saying, Joe, about some students are thriving because there's less social distractions, while others, are seeking that empowerment, of course. So it's going to be really interesting in the next few years, the research that comes out of this whole thing. To stay balanced, I'm going to be keeping his health in mind, which will keep my health in mind more. And then moving forward with really a newly inspired discipline, I think, to make sure that, all of our adolescents and young adolescents are supported as best they can be in this, crazy environment. But so thank you. Yeah, I'm just so inspired to see your faces and know you're out there. Everyone's doing their best.
Thanks, Monica. It's great to have you on the call. I really appreciate it. Meg?
I think the word that I started this session with earlier today was around this idea of endurance, right? Of like, and I think I have never been a runner. Like I pretend it was sort of funny. But I think about like you guys being like the taiko drummers that like are up the hill coming up from Burlington when and so you guys are that taiko drummer thing. And I feel like I need to continue to be that for my kids, to just like, pump them through. And I'm also appreciative of Joe's reminder that like, permission to like go read a book or go dance in your living room or whatever, like just take care of yourself and your, find those moments of joy and separation, like step out of the teacher mode, close the gates, and give yourself space to rejuvenate and recharge.
Thanks, Meg. And Kevin?
Yeah, so, well, I definitely want to share a resource, and I'll actually put it in the chat for all of you, but Changing Perspectives, Sam Drazen, we've worked with him for about 5 or 6 years now, and he's come into our school to do a disability awareness curriculum. He just added a ton of amazing SEL resources, and it's like $50 or $60 for the whole school. And it's one of those, he packages it so it's not a ton of extra work for teachers. So you can supplement your curriculum, you can use it as its own unit. So I told him I would help get the word out a little bit. He's a Vermont native, but this stuff is countrywide, and he's in Australia and Germany as well with this program. So it's definitely out there. So I'd love to, just pump the word out about that. And then, yeah, I guess my closing thoughts are just kind of echoing Meg. It just brings you just comfort in knowing that we're all in this together, and we have such an amazing team of teachers here, and just this collaborative group, and just to know we have each other to lean on and hear from, and commiserate with, and that we're all going through this together. And it just, because sometimes you feel like you're in a little bubble, you know, especially when you're working remotely, and then you see everybody, like, all right, everybody's experiencing this. And I think just that together brings a lot of power. And it's uplifting to know we can get through this, and we will.
Thanks, everybody. And, you know, if you can't do it, find people who can. And that's what I've done. And you folks are awesome. And I just so appreciate everything that you're doing. And I just want to also wish everybody, I hope you stay safe and stay well. And if you get the chance to see your family, to really appreciate that and to take advantage, you know, of whatever you can as we move forward. Our next meeting is on December 10th. And again, I just wish everybody the best. Keep doing what you're doing, and have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bye now, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Don. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, you
Bye.
guys. Take care.
Bye.
Good to